What's up, guys? So today we're going to go over how to create a user system for your website in Django. But before we get to that, I'm going to go over some tricks for working with forms for querying your databases and some session related information inside Django. How to use basically their sessions middleware. So we'll start off with a bit of a recap. So imagine we have a model, okay, that corresponds to relational database by using the model class inside Django, and this database is going to hold PC parts and PC brands, okay, and the PC parts, it's going to have part types that could be choices like GPU and RAM, and you'll probably want to add some more onto there, but I limited to that for brevity. And a name of the part, which will be the primary key here. And then it's going to have a many-to-many relationship with the brand, because some PC parts, most PC parts will be associated with one brand, like NVIDIA or AMD or something like that. But some PC parts, like say certain GPUs, they'll be associated with multiple brands, like NVIDIA and Gigabyte at GPU might be associated with. So it's going to be a many relationship because then brands will also have many associations with different PC parts. And this is going to make for an interesting kind of thing to query. So let's say you would want to build a user site where the user can query for different PC parts by specifying the part type and the brand. So to do this, you would make probably an HTML form, and you might be tempted to make, say, a selector for part type and then a text field for brand, and you would search up different brands. But the better thing to do to create a better user experience, okay, would not be to do that. It would be to only allow certain PC brands that are already inside of the database to be entered. Now, this could be kind of a pain in the ass because you have to query the database and then kind of generate the HTML code from there. Django gives you a way to make this much easier, much simpler to do. So, basically, Django's method is you create these classes, and it takes advantage of these meta classes, which we won't get too into in this tutorial. We'll just kind of take it for what it is. And you'll create these classes to correspond to your model classes. So there'll be a subclass of this model form class that will import from Django forms. And basically, in the meta section, they'll reference what class they correspond to, what actual Django model they correspond to, like say PC brand, and then they'll have a list of different fields that should reference attributes in that model. So say PC part form here, okay, will reference the PC part class, and the fields part type and brand will reference the attributes of the PC part class, part type, and brand. Now notice I left out name. So I did this strategically because the form I'm going to want to make is going to be made for, like, you'll look up the part type and the brand, and they'll give you a list of names. It'll search the database for all of the parts that match that and give you back a list of names. So I'm going to use this to generate a HTML form that'll allow you to search by part type and brand, and it'll limit brand, okay, being a many-to-many fields here. It'll limit brand to just display any of the primary keys of brands that already exist in the database for you. Okay, so to do this, I'm going to define a view, and I'm going to have this view make an instance of PC part form, of this PC part form class here. So I'm going to import, my models, and I'm going to make an instance of this. And then in my view, when I render my template, let's say some template dj.html, when I render this template, I'm going to give it this object instance of PC part form, okay, inside of my usual context dictionary. And then inside of the template, I'll go about defining a form like I usually would, but then instead of manually defining the inputs, I'll just put PC part form here. I'll just use it like I would use any other variable, and that'll manually make a bunch of inputs for me. Okay, so let's give this a try. Let's work with some real code here. So we'll go to our terminal, and let's go into my Django templates project, okay? And pull the repo if it isn't up to date. And you'll notice that I have this form models project. We'll work from that today. Okay, in my form models project, I've set it up where I have the done app that has like this fully finished code, and the start app that will work from instead. However, I'll mention I did something a bit that might throw a few of you off today, so just make note of it. The models.py with the models that I have inside here, because a project will share all of its models, I only put it in one spot. So I put it inside of the done app instead of the start app. So if you're going to look for where I defined all of my models, you have to go to this project into the done app models.py. Okay, and that's where I put these classes that I defined in my slides above. Okay, including the model form classes here. And then if I go into my start app, so if I look inside of start, and I look inside of the starts views.py, okay, you'll notice that when I import models, I don't import the models.py from the current directory. I import it from the done app. I'll say from done import models, and I use those models. Okay, that's just one little thing I've done because I didn't want to duplicate the models inside my app, inside my project, sorry. Okay, so just like in my slides, like I showed you before, I make an instance of PC part form, and I give that to home.djhtml. So let's take a look at home.djhtml. So home.djhtml is going to be in start, okay, templates. So in the start app, I have a templates directory with home.djhtml. Okay, and there's not much going on here right now. So it extends a, it extends a base template that I have at the top of my project. So at the top of my project, I have templates for the base template. We don't really need to check that out right now. It extends this, and it has a content block with nothing in it except for a header that says to do add the PC part form here. So let's take this form. So basically, we're gonna make a form. Okay. So just to remind you how you make HTML forms. So we'll have a form, and the form, when it makes a submission, when you hit every form, you make a submission somehow, and that's going to use some HTTP request. HTTP request somewhere, and you need to choose if it's going to be a get or a post. We're going to want to use post. So we put method equals post. We don't really need to give it an ID, and then action is going to be where the form posts to. Okay, so we have some options here. So if you look at my urls.py, so in form models urls.py, I'm routing between two apps here. So I want to work from the start app. So the start app is already going to have e/macid/start. Okay, so I could manually write like e/macid/start, and then let's go to my start urls.py, start app urls.py. Okay, and now I can define a path, and it could be something like PC part underscore post, something like this, and it'll go to a views view PC part underscore post underscore view. Okay, and I'll write that view in a second. So then I would write, so it would be e/start/PC part underscore post. Okay, and I could do this way where I have to write the URL. You don't have to write the domain name. You just have to write the path after this for the URL. So I could do this way. However, if you remember my tutorials from before, I showed you kind of a better way of doing this. So what you can do is you can specify. You could use this pragma. So instead of writing this out manually, because this might like change later, like I might decide to make a change to this path, I can give this a name here. So I'll give this a name. I'll call it PC part underscore post. Makes sense, right? And notice I defined app underscore name here. Okay, so this defines a workspace. Okay, and this is how I'm going to be able to distinguish between the start app and the done app. So in action here, what I can do is I can use this URL pragma. So I can specify URL, okay, and I'll specify the workspace start colon and the name of whatever path I want to reference here. Okay, so this is going to be PC part underscore post. And in general, this is just kind of a much better idea instead of manually writing out the path. Okay, and now what are we going to put inside our form? So the other thing that we do into Django with HTML forms is if we have the CSRF middleware enabled, which we should, we're going to write CSRF token at the beginning of our form here. And don't really worry too much about what's going on here. Just note that it's a good thing. It's a security thing. It's going to protect you from certain types of attacks. Okay, so just put it there and be happy that it's there and pretty easy to use. Okay, and now this is the part where we would maybe write stuff like input type equals text, right? And name equals whatever, right? And then we would start defining like the different types of input we want, right? Input type equals selector and like blah, 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 right? So instead of doing that, now what we can do is we can use that PC part form that we gave. So if we go back to our view here, our views.py, so we gave it PC part underscore form here. So we just include this variable okay, which is just an object instance of PC part form class that we made, and it'll automatically generate all of the input fields that we need. The only input field that we actually do need to put in there manually is for the submit button. Okay. Okay, so now this form, this HTML form, is going to manually generate all of the fields, all of the input fields that we need to query our PC parts. And then when we hit submit, it's automatically going to send a post to this URL. Now, if you remember my tutorial from before, I showed you how to make forms that do Ajax posts. We're not going to bother doing that here. So the main reason you want to use Ajax posts is when you want to make a change to the DOM without having to completely refresh the page. Over in this instance, we're just going to redirect on a post, so there's no reason to use Ajax. So like before, what we did is we wrote JavaScript code, and what I actually did is in that JavaScript code, like I made, we used jQuery, and I had an event that reacted to submit here, okay, and it stopped. I actually called the function prevent default that stopped it from making the default post. Here, we won't bother with that. It will just let it make the default post the way it does. So it'll just automatically make a post, and we don't have to write any JavaScript. Okay. Just note that this is not an Ajax post. Okay, so it will refresh the whole page. Okay, so now we're making a post to PC part post. And so we're going to want to handle the data that it posts there. Okay, so now it's gonna make a post, and it's gonna have post data corresponding to our PC part form here. Okay, so I defined my PC part post view here. So let's go to our views.py now. And now we need to define this function that we're calling here, that we called here, this PC part post view. Okay, and so the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to check. We're going to want to make sure that we made a post request. We'll say if request.method equals post, then all good. Then we'll continue doing stuff. If it's not a post request, then we'll return an HTTP response not found, because this URL isn't made for receiving GET requests. Okay, but if it is a post request, then what we'll do is we'll assume that the post data sent corresponds to our PC part form here. So what we'll do is we'll get a instance of PC part form again, and we'll give it the post data. So I'll write part form equals models.pcPartForm request.post. Okay, so before we made an instance, but we gave it nothing, and it just made a blank PC part form. It just gave us the stuff necessary to generate a PC part form. Now we're going to give it the post data for it to parse. And what this is going to be able to do now is it'll allow us to check. We'll do PC part form dot is valid to check if the data sent in this post request is valid for the PC part form. And if it is valid, okay, then we'll have access to that data via a attribute to the part form instance called cleaned data, which will work like a dictionary. So we'll be able to pull out. So if you remember PC part form, if we go back to our models.py, so PC part form, it kept track of a part type and a brand, okay, that correspond to the PC parts, part type and brand. And part type is a char field. So part type, I could type in part type equals part underscore form dot cleaned underscore data. Okay, and we use it like a dictionary. We ask it for part underscore type. Okay, so part type is a char field, so this is going to be a string that it returns. Okay, and we know it's going to be a string because we checked if the data is valid. Okay, and then the other thing we had here is brand. So brand is a bit more of a complicated case. Brand is a many-to-many field. So brand, when it returns here, is actually going to return a query set. It's going to be a query set of one thing, but it's going to be wrapped inside of a query set object. Okay? It's going to be a query set of a brand object, of a PC brand object. Okay, so keep in mind that this is a query set, because what we're going to want to do now is we're going to want to query the database for PC parts that match part type and brand. So to do this, we're going to PC parts. Okay, we're gonna do models.pcPart, and this time we're doing PC part, the model. Now we're gonna query this model .objects .filter, and we're gonna filter for part types that equal part type, and for brands that equal brands. Now this is a bit of a trick. Like I mentioned before, brand is a query set. So we can't just say brand equals brand. What we need to do is we just say brand is underscore, we need to use a field lookup, is in brand. So this would be the same thing as if, like, let's say we had a list of brand objects, or since we have a query set of brand objects, we're saying, is it inside of that query set or that list? Anything that's iterable, basically, you say, is it inside of it? Is the brand that we're looking we're looking for, is an instance of this brand inside of it, of this query set? Okay, and then let's actually take this whole thing here and let's convert it into a list. So this is gonna, remember, filter is gonna return a query set itself now, and so let's turn that into a list. So now we're gonna have a list of PC parts. And we could take that list of PC parts, and what we'll do with it is we will create a context dictionary that holds PC parts inside of it. Okay, so here, the easier way to write this, what we'll do is we'll render. Okay, so we're going to render another template now. So we'll render request PC parts.dg HTML. Okay, and we'll give it PC parts, the dictionary with PC parts inside of it. Okay, and at this point you might want to do something like an else if is not valid and return a better response. But for now, we'll just leave it as and if any of these things fail, they'll return an HTTP response not found. Okay, so now we're going to need this PC parts.dj HTML, and I think I forgot to include it inside of my templates. Yeah, I did. Let's take it from. What we'll do is we'll take it from the done app. So we'll take it from done templates, and I put it inside of because I don't want an overlap of PC parts.dj HTML, I put it inside another like redundant folder. Okay, so we take it from done templates, done again, PC parts.dj HTML, and we'll just copy that into start templates. Okay, so if we take a look at that, so inside of start templates, PC parts.dj HTML, you'll see that I do two things with it. First of all, I use the with directive to declare a variable, and I pull out the first element in the PC parts list. So remember, this is a list of stuff. So I pull out the first element and I display its type. And all of the types will be the same because I queried for part type here. And then in my content, I iterate over all of the PC parts name and I display a list of those names. Okay. All right, so now we're at the point where we could give this a try. We could try like running this, and we should be able to go to, we check our URLs, macid/start, and it'll service our home template here. Okay, and we can query for something, and then it'll send us to the PC part view here. Okay, so to do this though, because we're using a database, so let's go to our terminal here and make sure we're at the root of the project with manage.py, and make sure our conda environment is activated. Okay, and because we're using a database, the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to run make migrations, okay, to generate the database, okay, and then to actually apply those migrations. So to actually create the actual SQL database, we do migrate. Okay, and assuming that was all okay, that ran all right. Now we have our database. Now we want to actually put stuff inside of our database. For that, I gave you a script here, populate DB. And if you take a look inside of it, it's a pretty straightforward script. It has a function populate, and it just creates a bunch of objects. So it creates a bunch of PC brands, and then it creates a bunch of different PC parts with those brands associated with it. So let's run that script. The easiest way to run it is to open up the shell, say from populate db populate, and then just run populate. Okay, and it should only take 2 seconds. And if there are no errors or anything, it should just finish and be good. All right, and then we can exit and run our server. Okay, now with our server running, we can try going to localhost 8000/e/macid/start. Okay, and this brings us to our homepage. So now you get to see this is the form that was created by the PC part form. Okay, so if you remember taking a look at home.djhtml, what's being served here, we had a form here, and here's the input for the submit button, but then both of these, like this part type and this brand, were generated by this PC part form right here. Okay, and now we can select a GPU, and the brand name is limited to any of the brands that I currently have in the database, so I can select something like NVIDIA, and then I'll hit submit. Oh, and it looks like I made a little error. So I wrote requests somewhere here. So let's just check that out. Yeah, here it is. Okay, save that. No errors in console right here. So let's try reloading that. All right, let's try that again. GPU, NVIDIA, and submit. Oh, and it looks like I have another error going on here. So it looks like I'm just not displaying any of my PC parts list. Okay, so like I failed to look stuff up. So because I'm not making any, I don't see any errors in my terminal here. Let's take a look at pcparts.dghtml, and let's see, did I define anything wrong? So you could see the context dictionary, I gave it PC_parts. But in here, I'm using it as just PC parts. Right? No underscore. So the easiest way to correct this is I'll just change it in the dictionary. So I'll save that. I'll reload. Looks like no errors. Go back. Third time's the charm. So reload, NVIDIA, submit. There we go. So now you see it displays the different GPUs. So it seemed to have found 2 GPUs that matched NVIDIA 2080 Ti and 2070 that I had inside my database. And that's displayed by this part here. Okay, cool beans. So this is the basics of how to use the auto-generated forms. Okay, so now I'll move on to Django Sessions. So this stuff is going to be inside of a different project. If you want to look at the completed version of this stuff, you have to go to the user models project. So you have to go out and into the user models project here. I have a completed version of this. However, so this project right here. However, I'll continue working from this project for the moment because it doesn't make too much of a difference. Okay, so Django Sessions. So you may have noticed websites sometimes seem to be able to track the current browser that you're using. So when you're using a browser and you've logged in and done some work on it before, it seems to just be tracking that, like, oh, I know you already logged in and did some of this work. Not even logged in necessarily, you just access this site. It seems to know like who you are based on your browser. But if you go to a different browser, like say on your phone, it no longer knows who you are. So it does this generally via cookies. Okay, so there are actually a few other ways you could do it. You could do it by tracking your IP as well. But the most conventional way is through cookies. So Django gives you built-in middleware for doing this called the Sessions middleware, and it allows HTTP requests from the same browser to be associated with each other. So this is really useful functionality, and it's given to you in a very easy way. So you don't have to make the cookie yourself or anything. Django does this all for you. So to show you an example of this, let's define a view, a session view, and basically all you need to do to use sessions is just make use of this session attribute that's attached to every single request that you receive. And if the request is from the same browser, then the session attribute will be the same. Okay, so let's give this a try. So we go to our urls.py and let's make another URL here. Make it session, and that'll map to, oops, session view, and we'll give it the name session. Okay, so we'll define a function here. Corresponding view session. And the general way you want to use the session attribute is as a dictionary. Okay, that way you could attach many different things onto it. So we could do something like, let's say we just to exemplify how you could use the session variable, like the session functionality. Let's just keep a counter of every time somebody accesses this page. Okay, this URL. So I'm going to define a counter, and I'm going to do it by accessing the session attribute as a dictionary. I'll do a get count, and if count doesn't already exist, then I'll just return 0. Okay, and whatever count I get back, so whatever count I get back, I'll just increment it. I'll just assign the session attribute, like the dictionary aspect to it. Okay. It's +1. Okay, and then for our purposes here of just demonstrating how sessions work, I'll just return an HTTP response. Current count. I'll just display the current value. Super simple. Django makes working with sessions incredibly simple. Okay, so if I save this and I run the server, so I'll need to go to e/macid/start session here. current count equals 1, and see if I refresh the page. 2, if I refresh again, 3, and I can just keep refreshing and it'll keep counting up. Okay, so what's going on here? So like I mentioned before, it's keeping track of your browser, like who you are, based on a cookie given to your browser. So if you actually open up your console, okay, and then go to application, you might have to expand to see it, but go to application session here, and go to storage, and there's cookies here, okay, and that's actually storage, cookies, and you can click on the cookies that are given from localhost 8000, and you'll see there's actually another cookie that we've been using, that's CSRF token that we've been generating is also a cookie. But session ID is a cookie, and it's going to contain a value that's going to allow the server to uniquely identify your browser, okay? And it'll uniquely identify your browser, and then anything you store in the session variable there will also be uniquely identified by it. Okay? And you'll actually see what I could do here is if I clear storage and I refresh, the count starts again because you deleted that cookie. Okay, so now that we know how to use auto-generated forms and we know a bit about the existence of sessions, we're going to go over how to use Django's built-in user functionality. Okay, so Django has a built-in user database. It comes with built-in classes, okay, model classes for users, and it's going to have a user object with a username, password, email, first name, last name attribute, okay? And you can read more about the user object by going to their user documentation there. Okay, so to start off with, what we'll do is we'll create a user. Now, the user is a model, okay? A Django model, like any other model. So to use it, we have to make sure if we're at a project that we just like with any other, like if we created a model ourselves, we'll have to do Python manage.py, make migrations, migrate. Now we already did in this project, so we didn't really need to, but if you're working from another project and you hadn't already, just keep in mind, you are using database functionality here. You have to make migrations and migrate those migrations to use it. So we can just import the user object from django.contrib.auth.models, okay? And we can create it. We could create it like any other model, but it actually provides you with its own create method, create user specifically. And you just need to specify the username and the password. So the most like manual way of creating a user is just to open up a shell, okay? Importing that user object like I showed you, and then just executing this in the shell. Okay, so we create a user, say username equals Jimmy, password equals 1234. Okay, and we just give it as strings, and we go with the super secure password here. Okay, and that creates the user. So now we have a user inside of our database named Jimmy with password 1234. Okay, so then we can exit. Okay, and what we're going to want to be able to do is we're going to want to be able to create a login page where a user can log in. Okay, so to do that, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to first, the main functionality that Django is going to give us that we really need is the Authenticate function. Okay, so Authenticate is going to take a username and a password just as strings, and it's going to check if they're a valid username and password, and it's going to return a user if they are. Now, if it doesn't return, if you don't give it a valid username and password, you're going to have to check if user is not none. If it's not a valid username or password, it will be the none object, and you'll know that it's not authenticated. So we're gonna use this. So to really use this, let's create a login page. Okay, so to do this, we're gonna actually, instead of creating a model form for authentication ourselves, we can actually, the Django just actually already gives us one, this authentication form. So we can take that authentication form and import it in our views.py. So I already have it imported here. And now we can define a function, and I'm just going to copy and paste it. Login template view. Okay, and all it does is, just like before with the PC part, like the home template view, it gets an instance of our form, of our model form. So we get an instance of our authentication form. Okay, and we're going to give that to a login.dghtml file, okay, as auth form. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the sessions functionality to keep track of whether or not we've had a failed login attempt yet. So I'm going to define a variable failed, okay, and I'm going to get it from the session dictionary, and it'll default to false. So it'll default to like, no, we haven't tried and logged in and failed to log in yet. Okay, so we're going to need to be able to route to this login template view. So let's go to our urls.py, and let me take this code here. We'll define login. Whoops. Login template view is what we called it, and its name will be login. Okay, so we're going to route from login, okay, to the login template view, and that'll serve login.djhtml. So now we need to create login.djhtml. So let's go to our start app, and inside of our templates directory, let's go to start templates. Let's actually copy our home.djhtml, and we'll use that as a starting point for login.djhtml. And let's open that up. Login templates, login. Okay. And our login.djhtml is going to be a roughly the same thing as before. We're going to define a form, and we're going to use that auth form. Okay, we're going to use this authentication form object instance to generate our input fields. Okay, so we could take this PC part form. Let's delete this, and let's actually change this to login page. Login page. Okay, and the URL is going to be, if we take a look at our URLs, it's going to be start:/login. Oh wait, that's not where we're going to want to post. We'll get to that in a moment. First thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to give it auth form here. So instead of PC part form, we're going to have auth form. Okay, and that'll make our username and password fields respectively. Okay, and password will be an automatically like a text field where it doesn't show what you're inputting. Okay, and then yeah, so then the post we're gonna make, so we're gonna have to post to somewhere. Okay, and wherever we post to, we're going to use that to authenticate the way I was showing you just a second ago. We're going to use that to authenticate the username and password that's going to be inside of the post request. So let's change this to auth post. Okay, so it's going to post to the URL start auth_post. Okay, so let's go back to our urls.py and let's define a path now. This will be the auth path, and we'll change this to auth view, and its name needs to be auth_post. I guess we'll make it for consistency's sake auth_post_view. Okay, and now in our views.py, we're going to define that auth_post_view request. Okay, and our authentication form is going to be a little bit simpler than before. So if you remember, it's our PC part post view. So once again, we're going to make sure that we're getting a post. Let's do if request.method equals post. If it's not a post, we'll return an HTTP response not found again. Okay, if it is a post, things are going to be a little bit more straightforward. So last time we checked if the form data is valid. Like we had to retrieve basically the form data from an instance of this object again. So the authentication form makes things a little bit easier. It kind of like cleans the data, and all we need to do now is just retrieve the username, okay, from the request.post dictionary. And the password, same thing. All right. So now we have our username and password. So now we want to check that whatever username and password they entered into this form and posted here actually corresponds to a real username and password in the database. So to do this, we're going to run user equals, we're going to use the authenticate function. Okay. Now the authenticate function, we're going to have to import from django.contrib.auth. And while we're at it, let's also import the login function, which I'll get to in a moment. Okay, so let's take this and let's import it. Okay, so we're going to import authenticate and login. Okay, so the first thing we do is we authenticate. So we give it the request. Username is equal to this username that we retrieved. Password is equal to this password that we retrieved. Okay? Now, like I showed you before, we're going to check if user is not the none object. That means it did find a valid user. So, to deal with this, so if it did find a valid user, what we're going to do now is we're going to log in that user. So basically, I've authenticated the user. Now I want to be able to keep track from using basically the same mechanisms as the sessions variable here. I want to attach this user to every request that I'm receiving and keep track of the fact that, okay, he's been authenticated. Okay, let's leave him logged in now. So I'm going to use login request user. Okay, so this is going to attach the user to the request variable, and now in any of my functions, I'm going to be able to check if the user is authenticated. Okay, and it's gonna without actually having to go through this authentication process, it'll tell me if he is or not. Okay, and if he is, okay, now that he is logged in, I'm gonna do two things here. So Remember before I said, let's keep track if they failed to log in or not? Okay. Let's set request session failed to false here. Okay. And otherwise, so we're still gonna have to do one more thing here, but otherwise we'll set request session failed equals true. And now if we go back to our login.dg.html, what we can do here is we're giving it a failed variable here. So we could put if failed, and I could do something like p style equals color red, incorrect username or password. I'm sure many of you have seen this before on sites. Okay, so now this way it'll show this at the end. But in order to do this, what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to redirect. So if things fail, we're gonna redirect back to this login page. So how do we do that? So let's go up, and the same place that we import render from, we'll import redirect. Okay. And then the redirect function, we'll do return redirect. Okay. And if we go to our urls.py, we're going to want to redirect to login. So it'll be like start login. So the same way we use this in the templates. Start login to reference the URL of the login page. Now, what if we do successfully log in? If the user does authenticate and successfully logs in. Let's also redirect. Okay, but this time let's redirect to somewhere like a personal private page. So this is a general thing you would do. The user logs in, and then you go to that user's page. Okay. Now we don't have that page yet, so let's define it. Let's define one more route here. This will be private, and it'll go to private view, and its name will be just private. That's good enough. Okay, so you'll see this auth view, basically what it's doing is it's solely in charge of authenticating the user and logging them in, and depending on if it was able to successfully authenticate or not, it redirects to either the private page or just back to the login page. Okay, so if we do authenticate and we redirect to the private view, now we can create a view that is only accessible if the user is logged in. Okay, so to do this, I already routed to that private view, and I can just copy this code here. We'll define a view, private view, so I defined here, and it's going to check. It's going to use if. So now, like I said before, this login, it basically attaches this user to every request the same way that this session variable is attached to every request. And you could check from request.user if the user has been authenticated. And if they have, okay, then you could do whatever you want with this private view. If they haven't, then we'll do the same thing that we did before and just we put request.session is failed equals to true and redirect back to the login view. Okay. So if they have, what we'll do is we'll create a context and we'll give the user object, okay, to the context, and we'll render a private HTML page that has access to whatever user is logged in. Okay, so let's go to our templates one last time, and we could copy the home page again and create a private .dj HTML. Okay, and let's open that up. Templates private .dj HTML. Okay, so this is going to be private page. Get rid of this stuff. And what are we going to put in the content of this page? So, because we have access to the user object, we could do stuff like display the user's names here. Okay, we know the user is logged in. We've been given a user object. We could also double check that the user is authenticated before generating it here. Okay, and this is a good extra security measure because this will be checked before the HTML page is generated and sent to the user. Okay, so if the user is not authenticated when Django goes to generate this HTML page, it won't generate whatever is inside here. So we can take this stuff. So we'll use this user object now to present a personalized page. So this page will be personalized to the user based on the user object. Okay, so now we're ready to test out our login page. So let's go back to our project group. And once again, let's run manage.py run server. Whoops. So start views has no attribute private views. It looks like it does. Did I just not save? Yeah, it looks like I just forgot to save this file. Okay, so things are loading correctly. Okay, so we should be able to go to e/macd/start/login. Okay, so we're given a login page. So actually, before we do this, let's try and just access the private page without logging in. So if we go to private, and I think I made a mistake, a copy mistake. Yeah, when I went to my private view here, instead of referencing start, I referenced the login. So there's a little difference from my slides and my app here. Alright, so let's save this and let's try and go back. And it's not login view, it's just login. So when I redirect, just double checking my urls.py here, I was trying to redirect to the login page, which should be start login. Okay, so it was different in my slides, but that's okay. I can recorrect that. Okay. Yeah, so you'll see whenever I try and go to private, it just brought me back to the login page. You'll actually see it did a redirect. Yeah, so see it was 300 status code when I went to private. So that's a redirect, and then I ended up back at login. And I have incorrect username and password here. Okay. And let's actually go to my application. Let's clear my site data. And let's refresh on the login page now. Okay, and that got rid of that incorrect login. Now let's try and log in. So if I go to Jimmy, and let's say I put in a bad login password, I just put whatever. Yeah, once again, it displays that incorrect username or password in red. Let's try a good password. Jimmy 1234. Okay, and it sent me to a URL not found. So, did I get any errors here? No. So it probably sent to URL not found because this happened. So it didn't make a proper post here. Post. So let's go to my login page. Did I go to the right spot? Okay, it looks like I might have failed to log in somehow. So how did I fail to log in? Let's refresh. So let's say I have Jimmy 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, and it goes to the bad URL here. So I seem to fail to log in. So I tried to do authenticate with request, username was username. So did I forget a step? Let's check it out here. Or did I go back to bad login posts? Ah, I see what I did here. I forgot my return. What a stupid error. Okay, so so you'll see what happened here is I somehow, so the smart way to debug this would have been to put print statements through here, and then kind of notice like how I ended up, because I didn't put return here. I just ended up down here with the HTTP response not found. Now, first of all, the smarter thing to do would be to not just put HTTP response not found here, to put a more specific error. And yeah, you could have print statements here, and you could try and debug the control flow. But I ended up figuring out just looking through this carefully. Okay, that was silly of me, but it's a good thing to show you guys. Okay, so let's go back now and let's give this another try. Okay, so we'll refresh. Jimmy 1, 2, 3, 4. Success. Okay, and it feels all the better because I had that little bug there. So now it sends me to our private page. The page is customized. It has Jimmy inside here to that user. Okay, and that's the basics of setting up user authentication into Django. I will go over it a bit more. Some other things you would want to do is create like the user make a form for creating the user, making a form for changing the user's password, logging out the user. I haven't shown you yet, so we'll go over more user authentication on Friday. Take it easy, guys.